Hello everybody, it's the Mighty Gluestick 2017. How's it going, everyone? Good to have you back with me. And today I'm going to start with the one of my viewer requests, a recent one, for the Bulette. And there's some contention about how you actually pronounce the word Bulette. Some people call it Bulette. Other people just choose to call it the land shark. That's all fine, but if you call it the Bulette, that's good for you, but technically that's wrong. Tim Kask, the man who actually wrote this, in an interview on YouTube, you can go and look it up yourself, calls it the Bulette. And there's various reasons why it was called that. So that's what I'm going to call it. Before I actually knew this, I called it the Bulette myself, so whatever. The Bulette is one of the iconic creatures of Dungeons & Dragons. It's based off a plastic toy that was bought out of a bag of dinosaurs, which of course doesn't really bear much resemblance to any dinosaur known. And it's gone through many iterations over the years, but essentially remained the same. And I'm here today to give you some details about this mysterious creature and its secretive life, beyond its terrorizing capacity for violence. Of course, it is a very vicious predator. It's called a land shark for a reason. One of the things that was mentioned in previous editions, which has been omitted from the 5th edition, is that it's an egg-laying creature, and also that it exudes a substance, a slime, that dissolves dirt and soil around it, which allows it to travel more easily through the ground in a swimming sort of motion. And you could probably incorporate that into your game as a secret of the dwarves, who may have in fact captured some bullets and harvested this substance somehow in order to get at particularly difficult veins of very tough ore to perhaps mine adamantium, which was certainly how I would use one. And as a predator in itself, they're very good as a pop-up predator. They can just pop out of any sort of wilderness environment. They do favour environments rich in life. So typically that'd be temperate environments, but anywhere really where there's a large amount of things kind of like horses or antelopes or other sort of buffalo or something like that, Bulette will be around. That's the sort of prey that they favour. They go after hoofed animals and herds of them, and they will follow migration patterns to get as much game as they can. They don't actually lair, they're constantly moving. They are also listed as favouring halflings above all other humanoids, because halflings are so tasty and nutritious and generally have a high fat content. They're basically like humanoid chickens as far as the Bulette is concerned. They don't like dwarves, and they prefer not to eat dwarves, but they, even more so, they prefer not to eat elves, and nobody really knows why. They just don't like eating them, and if they realise that it's a bunch of elves, they'll actually avoid eating them. They may still kill them, but they won't eat them. They will probably eat dwarves in a pinch. They also eat each other, so most mating between two Bulette involves in the death of the male, much like praying mantises. They're just basically too vicious and too hungry to avoid eating any sort of prey that comes across them, with the exception of the young. Although I do believe, I'm sort of led to believe by the lore, that they basically abandon their young. They lay their eggs somewhere in an optimal position, and then they just leave, and they never actually meet their offspring, and if they do, it'll either be to breed with them or to eat them. So they have some interesting characteristics, and they have changed a little bit over time. Mostly in their size. Their size is reduced somewhat. If you look at the original pictures of the Bulette, they're a lot larger than they're depicted now. And their arrangement of scales and leg proportions have changed a bit over years as well. But they've pretty much gone back to their roots as an ambush predator that'll pop out of the ground and nab anybody who's around. And they also have a tremendous ability and athleticism that belies their bulk, and an ability to leap and basically take on whole groups of creatures. And this makes sense if they're a creature which is designed to attack herds of beasts, because they're just basically going to attack anything that they can find when they pop out of the ground. They're opportunistic ambush predators, which means they probably don't give chase very well. Their speed is listed as 40 feet on the ground and a burrowing speed of 40 feet. But I would say that's over short distances. They're not designed really for chasing down anything, although technically they're capable of it, and their constitution is such that, it's 21. They can run for days. But their intelligence is 2, their wisdom is 10, and their charisma is 5. They just don't have the temperament to concentrate on something for a long period of time. They're dogged and merciless, but they don't act like hunting dogs or anything like that. Their speed their bulk. They've got a dexterity of 11 and a strength of 19. And they've got an armor class from their heavy plates of leathery hide that cover their body. And various times it can appear rocky as well. But I think this is just a natural variation in the different bullae that you'll find. So they may have a metallic hue. They may be earthy coloured. It really depends on what their diet is and what regions they've been in, what sort of temperate environment they're in. Their food source and genetics is a mystery to most. So they can have a sort of metallic tinge to them. They can be greenish or brownish, but typically grey and leathery looking. And they have a swooped back sort of armor plate across their entire head and almost like a hinged jaw. They're not, from the depiction in the current 5th edition Monster Manual, it doesn't look like they have teeth, but they do. They've got a lot of teeth. It almost looks beak-like in this picture here, but it's changed a lot over time. So you can depict them with teeth or without. Bullae teeth may in fact be prized possessions of people. And of course their leather can be used for all sorts of things, although it's really quite heavy, and would probably you'd need a lot of processing before you could turn it into any sort of armor. They do have an armor class of 17, and they've listed as having 94 hit points. That would be variable. Like, keep their armor class the same, but their hit points could probably go up depending on the level of the party. They're listed as a challenge rating 5, but they could easily top that if you just increase their hit points. You don't need to increase any of their other stats, including the damage that they do. They're listed as having a bite attack, plus 7 to hit, and does 30 points of piercing damage. So, going back to the original roots of being able to bite through a level 1 creature in one bite. So one bite from one of these things is capable of killing a first level character, and that's fine. That's really how they were designed from the outset. They have a deadly leap ability, which is relatively new, but they have in the past been able to attack with all 4 limbs at the same time. So that's something that I would definitely incorporate. They don't have much of a tail, but they do have the ability to kick and slice with their limbs. So I would use that as an opportunity attack, depending on whether they're being flanked by things. These things, although they have their eyes focused on the front of their head, they probably do have periphery senses and are aware through tremor sense if creatures are flanking them from either side, and can still attack them with their back limbs. So they are quite capable of doing that. They're also capable of incredible leaps. Their strength is quite impressive. And this is not so much a leap with their limbs, this is their entire body catapulting them, kind of like they thump on the ground and burst out like a tick. They're just launched into the air through a flex of their body. I have seen personally a rhino do a standing jump that it took it about a foot up into the air and then spun 180 degrees to look behind it, because there was a snapping of a twig further down the wildlife park. It was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen, because these things weigh over a ton, as would a Bulette weigh easily over a ton. So the deadly leap allows it to jump at least 15 feet as part of its movement, so it can't exceed that 40 feet. And then when it lands on the ground, it essentially bowls everybody, or flattens them and lands on top of them. So they've got a DC 16 strength or dexterity saving throw, target's choice, or be knocked prone and take 14 points of bludgeoning damage plus 14 damage slashing damage. And so that damage is what I would use if the 14 points of slashing damage for one of those opportunity attacks with one of their limbs. And give them, if they're a fairly high level, or much higher level than the player party, give them the ability to use multiple attacks with those 4 limbs. So they can attack with all 4 limbs in one round if they're surrounded by foes, for sure. don't even hesitate. So yeah, the slashing damage, and if on a successful save the creature takes only half damage, isn't knocked prone, and is pushed 5 feet out of the Bulette space and into an occupied space, or it'll essentially be underneath the Bulette and scrabbling to get out of the way, hopefully not crushed. So, yes, they are terrific predators. They're shunned by most other creatures, so one of the signs that a Bulette is in the area will of course be disturbed ground, because they don't pass without trace. They leave burrows all over the place and bursting out and shredded remains of creatures, just a big smear of blood and skin and bits and pieces left over a wide area, like it's been just basically mashed and rolled in. And that will be close by to some disturbed earth, and you may in fact find some Bulette droppings or something like that, and their distinctive claw-toed footprints, which sink heavily into the ground because their weight dispersal is their limbs are relatively small compared to the bulk of their body, but they do have these tremendous digging claws, which would be quite distinctive. They are listed originally, like it was rumoured that they're a cross between like an armadillo and a snapping turtle and demon blood, which gives them essentially this restless, destructive nature and an endless appetite. So they'll basically never stop eating. Nobody knows how long they live for. Nobody knows how long their gestation period is or how many eggs they lay, that sort of thing. And really I would imagine nobody's really interested in studying them overly much. They are depicted in various bits of artwork and things as rideable creatures, so you can ride them. This would have to be Bulette that you've lucked across and found them in a juvenile state and have somehow cowed them into submission and managed to assuage their hunger somehow. I don't know how that would be, whether it's a spell-like effect or alchemical or druid magic which raises them with a more placid nature. Perhaps they've been lobotomized a little bit with a spike driven into their brain. I don't know. I leave that up to you, but it is possible that they could be an effective riding creature, but their instinct is to flee by leaping, not burrowing, by leaping out of the way, and then they will burrow into the ground to travel over long distances. They're not accustomed to travelling above ground overly much. And they are very hard to control around horses and other sort of creatures which will flee from a Bulette naturally. It's almost impossible to stop a horse from getting freaked out with a Bulette anywhere near it. I mean, honestly, would you? I don't think so. So yeah, it's not impossible, but yeah, they would be extremely rare and very, very expensive. I'd imagine somebody who's actually gone to the effort of raising one of these things as a riding beast, or just a force of destruction you could unleash in a general direction, is not something that you'd want to part with. So that'd be extremely expensive. But yeah, something to attain for sure. And I'd imagine a barbarian riding a Bulette would be, well, pretty much a goal and aspiration of any player character of say a half-orc barbarian. I certainly would. That'd be awesome. So that's the Bulette for you. One of the creatures of D&D myth and legend, and one of the few creatures of the game which is unique to Dungeons and Dragons. Well, it got its start there. There are Pathfinder versions, of course, and there also there's other versions of the Bulette, or basically subspecies of the Bulette, including there's a mutated Bulette that's found in Dungeon Magazine 37. From 1992, and there's in 1996 they published the Goldbrawn, which is a relative of the Bulette, and that was introduced in the Dragon Annual number 1. So it's a smaller version that looks more like a large turtle-like creature with the head of a Komodo dragon. And the interesting thing about that is this: while the Bulettes are solitary, the Goldbrawn are known to work in packs, and they possess the ability to spit rocks and boulders, which makes them significantly tactically different from the Bulette. Well, in 5th edition, they are much more dangerous because they can conglomerate in numbers, and numbers make a big difference in 5th edition tactics. Also, it's through the study of the Goldbrawns that has clued everybody into the fact that the Bulette probably also lay eggs. While it's harder to find Bulette eggs, it's definitely known that Goldbrawns lay eggs. So essentially, yeah, and they've been around for a couple of different editions too. So the Gold Brawn weren't one-hit wonders, and we'll probably see their like again. And yeah, so they've changed a little bit over time in the 3rd and 3.5 and 4th edition. 4th edition was basically just stats and not a lot of backstory, and as I say, the general size and challenge rating of the land sharks changed a little bit to fit with the more grid-orientated game that had sort of developed over those decades. But yeah, that's about it for them. Creatively, I would say go nuts with the Bulette. They can be as complicated or as simple as you want. It really depends. They are migratory creatures, so it could be a significant area event in your game world that people sort of forgot about these things, but they were legendary threats, particularly to farmers and ranchers and settlers. And if there is a migration of beasts coming through that are being tailed by Bulette, it's a significant threat to the entire area. All humanoids would be wise to be very wary because you just don't know how long it's going to last and how long these things are going to stay in the area. They will generally stay in an area as long as it is rich in game. So it may actually be in everybody's best interest to kill any excess game that they find. So it could be like the destruction of all the buffaloes in the Americas, people just killing animals for the simple reason that it will drive off the predators that they're attracting. And that could actually be a thing that happens in your Dungeons & Dragons world, which is very alien to our mindset, being simple earthlings. But really when a rich game environment attracts creatures which are quite capable of killing humans and do not shy away from doing so, or any other civilized race, they may protect themselves by doing that and actually just revert to a subsistence living on smaller game and actually kill larger game as a preventative measure. So that's an alien mindset that you can incorporate into the game from a frontier point of view that it makes the Dungeons & Dragons world a more interesting setting because it's taken that extra step into weirdness that you weren't expecting. It's like, why would you kill off this resource? Why are you just letting them die like that? Well, because if we don't, it will attract the land sharks, and the land sharks will kill all of our horses and then kill us. And the first thing that clues you in is the disappearance of all of our dogs. So yeah, land sharks, very cool. Thank you for the suggestion. I'll be back with more regular updates as we progress through this excellent new year. Thanks for listening, everybody.